I never imagined my weekly Sunday dinner tradition would end with me walking away from my family forever. That evening, as I placed my grandmother's antique serving dish filled with roasted vegetables on our mahogany dining table, my youngest, son Theron's words cut through the air like shattered crystal. "Face it, Mother, you're useless in today's world." The room fell silent. 30 years of maintaining River Maple Estate, raising 3 successful children, and sacrificing my dreams of becoming a writer, all reduced to useless. What my children didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment, quietly building a new life that would shock them all. But would they ever discover what their mother had become after walking away? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I suppose every story of reinvention begins with a history worth leaving behind. Mine started 62 years ago in River Maple Estate, a Victorian masterpiece that had been in my family for 3 generations. The house, with its weathered copper turrets and wraparound porch, stood as a testament to old money and older traditions in our quiet corner of New England. My name is Meredith Whitmore, though most people call me Mary. Until that fateful Sunday dinner, I was known primarily as the widow of distinguished Professor Augustine Whitmore, mother to 3 successful children, and the steadfast guardian of River Maple's legacy. What no one knew, not my children, not my late husband's colleagues, not even my closest friends, was that for the past 5 years, I had been secretly writing mystery novels under the pen name M.W. Stormwind, and my latest manuscript had just landed a 6-figure publishing deal. The irony of being called useless while sitting on such news wasn't lost on me. But then again, my children had always excelled at missing the complexities that made up their mother's life. River Maple Estate wasn't just a house. It was a character in our family's story. Every morning I would wake before dawn to watch the sun paint the eastern windows in shades of amber and rose. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves housing first editions and family photographs, had been my sanctuary since I inherited the house from my parents. It was there, in the hidden alcove behind the Renaissance literature section, that I wrote my first mystery novel, at age 57. My children, Astrid, Callum, and Theron, grew up in these halls, their laughter once echoing off the coffered ceilings and through the garden maze their great-grandfather had planted, now at 38, 35, and 32, respectively. They viewed River Maple as little more than an appreciating asset on their future inheritance portfolio. Astrid, my eldest, followed her father's footsteps into law, though she chose corporate litigation over his beloved constitutional law. She married Xavier Vale, another lawyer, and together they built what she called a power couple dynasty in Boston. Their conversations at family dinners inevitably circled back to billable hours and partner track positions. Callum, my middle child, emerged as a tech entrepreneur. He launched his first startup using connections from his father's university. Network, something he conveniently forgot when boasting about being self-made. His wife, Delphine, a former model turned social media influencer, spent most family gatherings documenting our quaint traditions for her followers. Then there was Theron, my youngest, the investment banker. Brilliant with numbers but blind to emotions, he married Zara, a social climber who viewed River Maple as an inconvenient reminder of old money that needed modernizing. Together they represented everything the current generation valued: success at any cost, appearance over substance, and the relentless pursuit of more. I had watched this transformation happen gradually, like watching beloved gardens wither through neglect. The children who once built blanket forts in the library and helped me bake cookies in our sprawling kitchen had morphed into strangers who checked their phones during family conversations and rolled their eyes at my outdated perspectives. The Sunday dinner tradition began 30 years ago, when Augustine and I decided our family needed one constant in our increasingly busy lives. Every week, regardless of weather or commitments, we gathered around the mahogany dining table that had witnessed 4 generations of Whitmore family meals. Augustine would sit at the head of the table, his reading glasses perched on his nose, often sharing amusing anecdotes from his constitutional law classes. After Augustine passed away 5 years ago, I maintained the tradition, though its nature shifted. What was once a warm family gathering became more like a weekly board meeting, where my children discussed their achievements and subtly competed for who had accumulated more success that week. It was during these dinners that I first noticed the widening gap between my world and theirs. While they talked about cryptocurrency investments and social media influence, I quietly observed, taking mental notes that would later find their way into my novels. My protagonist, Detective Isabella Blackwood, was partially inspired by these dinners, an older woman whose expertise was constantly underestimated by younger colleagues. My writing career began as therapy after Augustine's death. Decades earlier, I had set aside my literary ambitions to support his career and raise our family. The night after his funeral, I found myself in the library's hidden alcove, surrounded by the books we had collected together, and started writing. What began as journal entries evolved into character sketches, then plot outlines, and finally, full manuscripts. I chose the pen name M.W. Stormwind carefully. My initials combined with the name of the street where I first met Augustine. My agent, Rafferty O'Keefe, was the only person who knew my identity. We met through my best friend June Blackbriar's bookstore, where I had been quietly researching the mystery genre for months. "Your voice is unique," Rafferty had said during our first meeting. "You write about mature women with depth and agency. Do you know how rare that is in contemporary mystery fiction?" I did know, because I had spent years reading mysteries where women my age were either grandmotherly background characters or victims. My Detective Blackwood was different. She was 65, sharp as a thorn, and unapologetically complex. My first novel, Shadows in the Library, sold modestly but earned critical acclaim. The second, The Garden of Hidden Secrets, did better. But it was my third manuscript, The Professor's Last Lecture, that caught the attention of major publishers. The advance offer arrived the morning of that fateful Sunday dinner, 6 figures, with a 3-book deal. The irony of timing never ceases to amaze me. I spent that morning in my garden, tending to the heritage roses Augustine and I had planted together. The garden had always been my thinking space, where I could work out plot twists while deadheading flowers or develop character arcs while pruning climbing vines. The children used to help me here, learning the names of plants and the patience required to nurture growing things. Now they called it a waste of time and suggested hiring a landscaping service. The day itself was perfect. Early autumn, with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the coming change of seasons. I had prepared Augustine's famous roast, beef, paired with vegetables from my garden, and the freshly baked sourdough bread that Theron used to beg for as a child. The table was set with my grandmother's Limoges china, crystal glasses that caught the late afternoon light, and the antique serving dishes that had been wedding gifts. Astrid arrived first, as always, checking her phone while kissing my cheek. Xavier followed with their twins, who immediately asked for the Wi-Fi password. Callum and Delphine came next, the latter filming her entrance for her social media followers. My followers love this authentic family content, she explained, positioning herself to capture the perfect vintage aesthetic of our dining room. Theron and Zara were last, bringing a bottle of expensive wine and thinly veiled criticism about my choice to keep the original Victorian wallpaper in the entrance hall. "Mother, you really should consider updating," Zara said, running a manicured finger along the wall. "I know an excellent interior designer who could bring this place into the 21st century." I simply smiled, remembering how I had just written a scene where Detective Blackwood solved a crucial clue hidden in antique wallpaper patterns. My children had no idea that their conversations often inspired the most interesting plot points in my books. Dinner began as it always did, with Astrid dominating the conversation about her latest high-profile case, Callum interrupting with updates about his company's valuation, and Theron checking his phone for market updates. I served the food, filled glasses, and listened as I had for years. The conversation turned, as it increasingly did, to River Maple's future. "Mother," Astrid began, using her courtroom voice, "we've been discussing the estate's potential. This property, if properly developed, could be transformed into luxury. Condominiums. The land alone is worth millions," Callum added, his entrepreneur's mind already calculating profits. "We could maintain the main house as a historical centerpiece while developing the grounds." I continued serving, my hands steady as I placed the roasted vegetables on the table. These conversations weren't new. They had been floating various proposals for maximizing the estate's potential since their father's death. What they failed to understand was that River Maple wasn't just property. It was the keeper of our family's stories. "The market is perfect right now," Theron chimed in, swirling his wine with the expertise of someone who had recently discovered wine appreciation. "We could triple our investment within 5 years. And Mother," Zara added with false sweetness, "you could finally relax in a modern apartment. No more struggling with this enormous house." I thought about my hidden alcove in the library, where my latest manuscript lay safely stored in a locked drawer. I thought about Detective Blackwood's latest case, which centered around a family's fight over an historic estate. Sometimes, life does imitate art. "I'm quite comfortable here," I replied, passing the breadbasket. "The house and I understand each other." Theron scoffed, a sound that reminded me painfully of his father when he was dismissing an ill-prepared student's argument. "Mother, be realistic. You're not getting any younger, and this place is becoming a burden. It's time to think practically." "Practical doesn't always mean profitable, Theron," I said quietly, watching the sunlight fade through the dining room's bay windows. The gardens outside were beginning to disappear into evening shadows, much like my children's memory of the home that had shaped them. "This isn't about profit," Astrid interjected, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's about making sensible decisions for your future. Dad would have wanted us to protect your interests." I almost laughed at that. Augustine, who had spent hours in the library reading poetry to our children, who had helped me plant every rose bush in the garden, who had understood that some things held value beyond their market price. He would have seen right through their arguments. "Your father," I began, but Theron cut me off. "Dad's not here, Mother, and frankly, holding on to this place out of sentiment is exactly the kind of outdated thinking that's holding you back. Face it, Mother, you're useless in today's world. You need to let us handle things now." The words hung in the air like frost, crystallizing the moment everything changed. The children fell silent, perhaps realizing Theron had finally said aloud what they had all been thinking, Zara looked smugly satisfied, while Delphine's hand twitched toward her phone, probably fighting the urge to capture this authentic family drama for her followers. In that moment, I thought about Detective Blackwood, about how she would handle such a situation. I thought about the publishing contract sitting in my desk drawer, about the years of secret writing, about the strength I had discovered in myself after Augustine's death. The silence stretched, everyone waiting for my reaction. Tears, perhaps, or angry denials. Instead, I stood slowly, smoothed my napkin, and looked at each of my children in turn. They had my eyes, Augustine's nose, generations of privilege in their bearing, and not an ounce of understanding about the woman who had given them everything. "Dinner is over," I said quietly. "Please see yourselves out." "Mother," Astrid began, but I held up my hand. I said, "Dinner is over." They left in stages, confusion mixing with irritation on their faces. None of them noticed that I didn't walk them to the door as usual. None of them realized that this would be the last Sunday dinner at River Maple Estate. After they left, I stood in the library, surrounded by the books that had witnessed our family's story. Through the window, I could see my gardens in the gathering darkness, the roses Augustine and I had planted still blooming despite the advancing season. In my hidden alcove, my latest manuscript waited, along with the publishing contract that would change everything. I picked up my phone and called Rafferty. "I'm ready to sign," I said. "And I think I've just found the perfect plot for my next book." Sometimes the most significant moments in life arrive disguised as ordinary Sunday dinners. Sometimes the most important decisions are made while serving roast beef on antique china. And sometimes being called useless is exactly the push you need to finally reveal your true worth. The morning after that final Sunday dinner dawned with an unusual clarity. I woke before sunrise, as I had for decades. But something felt different. The weight of pretense I'd carried for years had lifted, replaced by a strange lightness. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, all from my children. I silently thanked Augustine for teaching me how to mute notifications. Making my way to the kitchen, I followed my usual routine. Brewing coffee in the antique percolator that Theron had once called charmingly obsolete. The irony wasn't lost on me. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the marble countertops. These same counters had supported countless family meals, homework sessions, and late-night conversations. Now they would witness my transformation. I carried my coffee to the library, settling into the leather armchair that still held the impression of Augustine's form. The publishing contract lay on the desk where I'd left it the night before, its pages crisp and promising. Beside it sat my leather-bound notebook, filled with ideas for my next novel. A story about a woman who disappears from her own life, leaving behind only cryptic clues in a garden she'd tended for 30 years. The first email arrived at 8:07 a.m., from Astrid naturally, always the first to attempt damage control. "Mother, we need to discuss last night's unfortunate incident. Theron's words were poorly chosen, but his underlying concern is valid. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Astrid." Callum's message followed at 8:23 a.m. "Mom, let's not be hasty. We should meet to discuss the estate's future rationally. I've run some numbers you might find interesting." Theron didn't email. He sent a text at 9:15 a.m. "Mother, you're being emotional. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." I read each message twice, noting how none contained an apology. Instead, they all assumed I would eventually bend to their will, as I had so many times before. They expected the mother who had always prioritized their needs, who had smiled through their criticisms and absorbed their casual cruelties. That woman died last night, somewhere between useless and outdated. I spent the morning in my study, the one room in River Maple Estate that my children had never fully explored. Here, surrounded by my research materials and writing notes, I began implementing the plan I'd been crafting for months. First, I called Rafferty. "I'm ready to go public," I told him, my voice steady. "It's time for M.W. Stormwind to step into the light." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure, Mary? The publicity will be intense. Your family, my family, just gave me the final push I needed," I replied, thinking of Theron's dismissive tone, Astrid's condescension, Callum's calculating gaze. "Schedule the interviews. Book the appearances. It's time." Next, I called June Blackbriar, my closest friend and the only person besides Rafferty who knew about my writing. She answered on the first ring. "I saw Delphine's Instagram story," she said instead of hello. "That girl really doesn't understand the concept of private family moments, does she?" I felt my breath catch. "She posted about last night. Just some artistic shots of your vintage dining room with cryptic captions about family dynamics and generational transitions. Don't worry, she was too busy filtering the photos to capture any actual drama." I closed my eyes, remembering how Delphine's phone had been ever-present throughout dinner. "June, I'm doing it. I'm going public with the books." The silence that followed was brief, but weighted. "Well, hot damn," she finally said. "Want me to host the reveal party at the bookstore?" This was why I loved June. No questions about consequences, no warnings about family reactions. Just immediate, practical support. "Actually," I said, "I have something bigger in mind." As I outlined my plan, I heard the front door chime. Through my study window, I watched Astrid stride up the path, her court appearance power suit perfectly pressed, her expression set in what I recognized as her cross-examination face. "June, I have to go. Operation Phoenix is launching." "Give her hell, honey," she replied before hanging up. I took my time responding to the doorbell, watching through various windows as Astrid's professional demeanor gradually cracked. By the third ring, she was checking her watch. By the fifth, she was pacing. I waited until she pulled out her phone, presumably to call for reinforcements, before opening the door. "Mother," she began, automatically stepping forward to enter. I remained in the doorway, blocking her path. "Astrid." I wasn't expecting visitors today. She blinked, thrown by this deviation from our usual script. I had always stepped aside, always welcomed them in, always prioritized their convenience over my own peace. "Mother, don't be difficult. We need to talk about last night." "No," I said, surprising us both with the firmness in my voice. "We don't. This is exactly why we're concerned," she pressed, lawyer mode fully engaged. "You're acting irrationally. If you just listen to our proposals—" "Astrid," I interrupted, "do you remember what you wanted to be when you were 12? The question caught her off guard. What does that have to do with anything?" "You wanted to be a ballet dancer. You had talent, too. But your father thought law would be more practical, and you wanted so desperately to please him." "Mother, I was a child. Children have foolish dreams." I smiled, thinking of my own foolish dreams that had recently earned a 6-figure advance. "You're right. Children dream. Adults compromise. But sometimes, Astrid, adults get second chances to dream again." What are you talking about? Her frustration was showing now, cracking her professional veneer. I'm talking about choices, dear. Mine, specifically. I choose not to discuss the estate's future today. I choose not to justify my decisions to my children. And I choose to close this door now, Mother. The heavy oak door shut with a satisfying thud, cutting off whatever legal argument she had been preparing. Through the stained glass, I watched her stand there for several moments, her silhouette rigid with disbelief. Finally she turned and walked away, her heels clicking angrily on the path. Back in my study, I found 3 more missed calls and a text from Callum. Astrid says you're being impossible. Family meeting at my house tonight, 7 p.m. Non-negotiable. I smiled, thinking of the press release Rafferty was preparing right now. By 7 o'clock tonight, my children would have much bigger concerns than my impossible behavior. The rest of the morning passed in a productive blur. I called my bank and confirmed that all my accounts were secure, and solely in my name, a precaution I'd taken months ago when I first started seriously planning this transition. I contacted my attorney, updating my will, and ensuring River, Maple Estate's future would be decided on my terms, not my children's. Around noon, June arrived with lunch and moral support. We sat in the garden surrounded by the late-blooming roses that had featured so prominently in my second novel. Tabaho, you ready for this? She asked, pouring iced tea from a crystal pitcher. Once Rafferty releases that statement, there's no going back. I watched a monarch butterfly land on a nearby bloom, its wings catching the sunlight. I've been going back for 30 years, June. Always retreating, always compromising, always putting everyone else's dreams ahead of my own. I'm ready to go. Forward. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then let's make it count. At exactly 2 p.m., Rafferty's office released the statement to selected media outlets. By 2:15, my phone was exploding with notifications. By 2:30, Jur MWS Stormwind was trending on Twitter. At 2:45, Delphine posted a shocked-face selfie with the caption, "When you find out your MIL is secretly a best-selling author. Brr, plot twist. Family secrets." The first call from Theron came at 3 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. Astrid tried at 3:05, then again at 3:10. Callum sent a text that simply read, "Mom, what the actual hell? I spent the afternoon in my hidden alcove, working on my next novel." The protagonist, a woman in her 60s, had just discovered her own power, art imitating life, or perhaps the other way around. At 6:30 p.m., a car pulled up to River Maple Estate. Through the library window, I watched all 3 of my children emerge, along with their spouses. They marched up the path like an invading army, Astrid in the lead with a manila folder that probably contained legal documents. I pressed the intercom button I'd had installed that morning. "Yes?" "Mother." Astrid's voice crackled through the speaker. "Open the door immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm on a deadline. My publisher expects the first draft of the new book in 6 months." "This isn't funny," Theron snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The media is having a field day." "Yes," I replied calmly. "They are. Rafferty says we've already had inquiries from several major networks about interviews. Apparently, people are quite interested in a 62-year-old debut author who's been secretly writing bestsellers." "Mother," Callum tried, his entrepreneur's mind probably already calculating how to profit from this situation. "Let's discuss this as a family. We can help you manage this situation." "Manage?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Like you wanted to manage River Maple? Like you've tried to manage me?" "No, thank you. I'm quite capable of managing my own success. Success? Theron's voice dripped with scorn. You got lucky with a few books. That hardly qualifies as... My advance for the next 3 books was $600,000. I interrupted, enjoying the shocked silence that followed. Plus royalties, and that was before today's announcement. Rafferty expects we can renegotiate now that my identity is public. More silence. I imagined them exchanging looks, recalculating their positions, reassessing the mother they thought they knew so well. Now, I continued, if you'll excuse me, I have writing to do. My protagonist is about to make a life-changing decision, and I want to get the details just right. Mother. Astrid tried one last time. Please don't do this. Do what, dear? Write successful novels, maintain control of my own home, make decisions about my own life? I'm afraid it's too late for that. I've been doing all of those things for quite some time now. You just didn't notice because you were too busy assuming I was... What was the word? Ah, yes, useless. I ended the intercom conversation, there, leaving them standing on the path as the evening shadows lengthened. Through the window, I watched them argue among themselves, saw Astrid wave her manila folder in frustration, observed Theron's angry gestures, and Callum's attempted mediations. Finally they left, their departure as much a retreat as an exit. I waited until their car disappeared down the driveway, before returning to my writing alcove. The scene I was working on needed finishing, a crucial moment where my protagonist confronts her own children about their assumptions and prejudices. My phone buzzed with a text from June. Just saw the news coverage. You're trending on every platform. How does it feel to be the literary world's newest sensation? I looked around my study, at the walls lined with books Augustine and I had collected, at the garden visible through the window where I had planted, and pruned and planned, at the desk where I had secretly built a new life, while my children plotted to dismantle my old one. It feels, I typed back, like finally becoming visible. The next morning's newspapers carried the story. Mystery author M.W. Stormwind revealed. Widow turns family estate into literary empire. The articles painted me as a literary Cinderella, emerging from domestic obscurity into creative triumph. They didn't know the half of it. Rafferty called early, his voice bright with excitement. The publishers want to move up the release of your next book. The publicity is better than we could have hoped for. Are you ready for what comes next? I looked at the family photos on my desk. Images of younger versions of my children, of Augustine, of the life I had lived so carefully and quietly. Then I looked at my manuscript, at the words I had written in secret, at the story I was finally ready to tell. Yes, I said, I'm ready. The inciting incident wasn't really Theron calling me useless. It wasn't even the dinner that ended 30 years of family tradition. The true inciting incident was the moment I decided to stop being the mother they expected and start being the woman I had always been. Someone who had stories to tell and the courage to tell them. Opened my laptop and began to write. The media storm that followed my revelation as M.W. Stormwind transformed River Maple Estate into an unexpected literary landmark. Journalists camped at the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mystery maven of New England, as one particularly creative headline dubbed me. Book clubs across the country suddenly added my novels to their reading lists, finding new meanings in Detective Isabella Blackwood's sharp observations about ageism and family dynamics. My phone continued to accumulate messages from my children, each one a different variation of damage control. Astrid's texts became increasingly legal in tone. Callum's focused on managing the brand opportunity, and Theron's oscillated between anger and attempted manipulation. I read them all but responded to none. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Instead, I focused on the interviews Rafferty had carefully selected. The first was with Victoria Laurent from Literary Review Weekly, a respected journalist known for her thoughtful profiles of authors. "Why keep your identity secret for so long?" Victoria asked as we sat in my library, her recorder catching the soft crackle of the fireplace. I took a moment to arrange my thoughts, looking at the wall of books behind her. When you've spent decades being defined by others, as a wife, a mother, a widow, creating something that's purely your own becomes precious. I needed to know that Detective Blackwood could stand on her own merits, without the weight of family expectations. And now? Now? I smiled, thinking of Theron's dismissive words. Now it's time to show that women my age aren't just supporting characters in other people's stories. We're writing our own. The interview ran as a feature article the following Sunday. By Monday morning, my agent had received dozens of speaking invitations from women's groups, literary festivals, and universities. My children, I learned through June's intelligence network, were beside themselves. Delphine's social media engagement has skyrocketed, June reported over our weekly tea. She's positioning herself as the insider who will reveal the real story behind M.W. Stormwind. I couldn't help but laugh. The real story has been right in front of them for years. They just never bothered to look. The first real confrontation came 3 weeks after my revelation. I was in the garden, deadheading roses, while dictating notes for my next chapter into a recorder, a habit that would have shocked my children, who thought I could barely operate my smartphone. "Mother!" Astrid's voice cut through my narrative flow. She stood on the garden path, looking incongruous in her courtroom heels and tailored suit. I turned off the recorder but continued with my gardening. "Hello, Astrid. The roses are lovely. This year, aren't they?" "This has gone far enough." She thrust a folder toward me. "These are the papers for a psychological evaluation. We're concerned about your recent behavior." My secateurs snipped cleanly through another spent bloom. "Are you suggesting that writing successful novels is a sign of mental instability?" "You're not just writing novels. You're destroying our family's reputation. Do you have any idea what this publicity is doing to our professional lives?" I straightened up, finally meeting her gaze. "Actually, I do. Your firm's partners are delighted to have a connection to M.W. Stormwind. They've already requested signed copies of all my books. Callum's company has seen increased interest from investors who appreciate the literary heritage angle. And Theron's bank is hoping I'll consider them for my considerably expanded investment portfolio." Her face flushed. "You've been investigating us?" "Darling, I'm a mystery writer. Research is what I do. I removed my gardening gloves, taking care to fold them properly. Would you like to know what else I've discovered? The real estate developer you hired to evaluate River Maple Estate. The meetings with the Historical Society about modernization options. The trust fund manipulations Theron was planning. Those were meant to protect you." "No, Astrid. They were meant to control me. There's a significant difference." I picked up my basket of trimmed roses. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a deadline to meet. Detective Blackwood is about to uncover a crucial piece of evidence in her latest case." "Mother, wait." Something in her voice made me pause. "Why didn't you tell us? About the writing? About any of it?" For the first time since this began, I heard genuine hurt beneath her professional facade. When was the last time you asked me about my interests, Astrid? When was the last time any of you saw me as something more than an obligation to be managed? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Exactly. I turned toward the house, then stopped. You know what the saddest part is? Everything I've achieved, the books, the success, the recognition, it could have been something for us to celebrate together. Instead, you're standing in my garden with commitment papers. I left her there, surrounded by the roses that had featured so prominently in my second novel, The Garden of Hidden Secrets. Later, I saw her sitting in her car for nearly an hour before finally driving away. The following week brought my first television appearance on Morning Literary, a respected book-focused program. The host, Ramona Hayes, had actually read all my books and asked thoughtful questions about Detective Blackwood's development. There's a scene in your latest book, she said, where Isabella confronts her adult son about his attempts to force her into retirement. It feels incredibly authentic. I smiled, thinking of Theron. Sometimes the best fiction comes from truths we're finally ready to tell. The interview went viral, particularly among women of a certain age who recognized their own struggles in my words. Letters began arriving at River Maple Estate, hundreds of them, sharing stories of late-life reinvention and thwarted dreams finally pursued. Rafferty called with updates almost daily now. The publishers want to move up the release of your next book. The pre-orders are unprecedented for a mystery series, and there's talk of a television adaptation. Detective Blackwood on screen? I mused, imagining my sharp-witted protagonist solving crimes while delivering cutting observations about society's treatment of older women. That could be interesting. June helped me sort through the mounting interview requests and speaking invitations. We set up a proper office in one of River Maple's unused bedrooms, converting the space that had once been Callum's room into a modern command center for M.W. Stormwind's expanding literary empire. Callum would have a fit if he saw what we've done to his precious Star Wars wallpaper, June commented as we installed the new computer system. Callum hasn't set foot in this room in 15 years, I replied. He's forfeited his wallpaper rights. The transformation of River Maple Estate continued. The library, always my sanctuary, became my official writing space, complete with a proper desk and ergonomic chair. The formal dining room, scene of that fateful Sunday dinner, was converted into a meeting room where I could host my publishing team and literary visitors. My children's reactions to these changes came through various channels. Astrid sent increasingly desperate legal letters. Callum attempted to broker a family brand partnership through his business manager. Theron surprisingly maintained radio silence after his initial angry outbursts. It was Zara who finally broke the stalemate, arriving unannounced one afternoon as I was reviewing copy edits for my next book. "You've outplayed them all, haven't you?" she said without preamble, settling uninvited into the chair across from my desk. I marked my place in the manuscript. "This isn't a game, Zara." "Oh, please." She waved her hand dismissively. "Everything's a game. You've just changed the rules, and they can't stand it. Do you know what Theron said last night? That he never really knew you at all." "Perhaps he's right." They're all falling apart, you know. Their perfect little world where Mother did what she was told and stayed quietly in the background. It's shattered. And the funny thing is, she leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially, I'm actually enjoying watching them squirm. I studied my daughter-in-law carefully. Beneath her usual polished exterior, I detected something new. Respect, perhaps. or at least appreciation for a well-executed power move. "What do you want, Zara?" "Want? Nothing. I just came to say that I've read your books. All of them. They're good. Really good. And that detective of yours, she reminds me of you. The real you, not the you they wanted you to be." With that, she stood and walked out, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the distinct impression that the family dynamics were more complicated than I'd imagined. The next morning brought another surprise. A package arrived from Callum's wife, Delphine. Inside was a bound collection of social media posts, hundreds of them, all relating to M.W. Stormwind's revelation. A note was attached. "Your story is resonating with women everywhere. Maybe it's time for a memoir. P.S. Your Instagram aesthetic would be amazing. Call me if you want to discuss strategy." I had to laugh at that. Delphine, whom I'd always dismissed as superficial, had inadvertently provided valuable market research. The social media response to my emergence was overwhelmingly positive, particularly among women over 50 who saw themselves in my journey. Even as my public profile grew, I maintained my writing schedule. Detective Blackwood's latest case was taking shape, influenced perhaps by recent events. She was investigating the disappearance of a wealthy widow's art collection, only to discover that the widow herself had orchestrated the whole thing as a way to test her children's characters. June read the first draft and raised an eyebrow. "Subtle, Mary, very subtle." "I have no idea what you mean," I replied innocently, but we both knew better. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, a new rhythm established itself at River Maple Estate. Mornings were for writing, afternoons for business matters, and evenings for reading the countless letters from readers who saw their own stories in mine. My children's absence created a strange kind of presence, a negative space that highlighted how much of my life had revolved around their needs and expectations. Now, that space was filled with other things: creativity, purpose, and a growing sense of possibility. Rafferty called with updates about the television adaptation negotiations. "They want to know if you'll consult on the script, and there's interest in your life story as well. Several producers have reached out about rights to your journey." "My journey isn't over yet," I told him. "Let's focus on Detective Blackwood. For now." But life, as always, had other plans. One morning, as I was working in my study, the security system announced a visitor. The camera showed Theron standing at the gate, alone. For a moment, I considered ignoring him, as I had ignored so many of their attempts at contact. But something in his posture, less rigid than usual, more uncertain, made me press the intercom. "Yes." "Mother." His voice crackled through the speaker. I finished your latest book last night." Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. "There's a scene," he continued, "where Detective Blackwood confronts her son about his assumptions about her capabilities. He says something about her being out of touch with modern times, and she responds, 'The world doesn't belong only to the young,'" I quoted softly, "and wisdom doesn't expire with age." "Yes." He cleared his throat. That scene, it felt familiar. I watched him on the security screen, this youngest child of mine who had always been so certain of everything. "Would you like to come in, Theron? I just made coffee." He looked up at the camera, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to beg for stories before bedtime. "Yes, please." As I buzzed him through the gate, I thought about Detective Blackwood's wisdom. Sometimes the hardest mysteries to solve are the ones closest to home. Perhaps it was time to begin unraveling this one. The coffee was hot and strong, served in the delicate cups his grandmother had left me. We sat in the library, surrounded by the books that had shaped both our lives, though in very different ways. "I've been angry," he finally said, cradling his cup. "Not just about the books, but about everything. Finding out that you had this whole other life, this talent we never knew about. It made me question everything I thought I knew about you." "That was rather the point," I replied gently. He looked up sharply. "Was it? Was all this some kind of lesson?" "No, Theron. It was something much simpler, and much harder. It was me finally choosing to be myself regardless of how that might disrupt everyone else's expectations." "But why didn't you tell us? We could have helped, supported." "Could you? Would you have supported my writing if it meant accepting that your mother wasn't just the family caretaker? Would you have celebrated my success if it meant acknowledging that I had dreams beyond managing River Maple Estate for the next generation?" He was quiet for a long time, turning the cup in his hands. "I read some of the letters your readers have sent, the ones posted online. So many women saying how your story inspired them, how Detective Blackwood made them feel seen. And I realized that while I was calling you useless, you were actually changing people's lives." He set the cup down carefully. "I'm sorry, Mother, not just for what I said that night, but for all the times I dismissed you, all the times I assumed I knew better just because I was younger." It wasn't a complete resolution. Those only happen in books. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of assumptions that had separated us for so long. "Would you like to hear about the book I'm working on now?" I asked. His smile was tentative but real. "Yes, I would." As I began to tell him about Detective Blackwood's latest case, I thought about how stories have the power to bridge gaps we think are unbridgeable. Sometimes it just takes longer than we expect for the right words to find their way home. The autumn brought unexpected changes to River Maple Estate. As the gardens blazed with fall colors, my world expanded in ways I never imagined. The television adaptation of my first Detective Blackwood novel was moving forward, with prestigious streaming services competing for the rights. My publisher had scheduled a national book tour, and my social media presence, expertly managed by a surprisingly helpful Delphine, was growing daily. But the most significant change came from within my own family. After Theron's visit, a subtle shift occurred in our dynamics. It started small. Astrid began sending emails about legal matters related to my publishing contracts, offering professional advice rather than criticism. Callum's business proposals transformed into genuine questions about my writing process. Even Zara, ever the social strategist, started hosting literary-themed dinner parties where my books were featured prominently. One crisp October morning, as I was reviewing the latest script adaptation of Shadows in the Library, my phone buzzed with a text from Astrid. "Mother, I found something in Dad's old office at the university. Can we talk?" I hesitated. Our last few conversations had been strained, despite the professional veneer. But curiosity, a trait essential for both writers and detectives, won out. "Come for tea at 4, I replied. She arrived precisely on time, carrying a worn leather briefcase I recognized as Augustine's. The sight of it sent an unexpected pang through my heart. I was clearing out Dad's remaining things at the university, she explained as I poured Earl Grey into my mother's Wedgwood cups. They're converting his old office into a graduate student lounge. I found this in the back of his filing cabinet. She opened the briefcase and carefully removed a stack of papers, yellowed with age. My breath caught as I recognized my own handwriting. Stories I'd written in my 20s when Augustine and I were first married. "There's more," Astrid said softly, pulling out a folder labeled Winnie's Stories in Augustine's precise hand. Inside were dozens of literary magazine submissions, rejection letters, and notes in my husband's handwriting. Exceptional character development. Strong narrative voice. She needs to keep writing. I had no idea he kept these, I whispered, touching the papers gently. I stopped writing when you children came along. There never seemed to be enough time. There's a letter, Astrid said, handling me an envelope that had never been sealed. It's addressed to you. The paper was old, the ink faded, but Augustine's handwriting was clear. My dearest Winnie, if you're reading this, you've finally found your way back to your stories. I've kept these all these years, hoping that someday you would remember the fierce young writer who captured my heart in that creative writing seminar. Your tales of mystery and insight were what first drew me to you. Not just your beauty or your kindness, but your mind, your creativity, your unique way of seeing the world. I know I've asked much of you over the years, perhaps too much. Theron, demands of my career, the children, the endless social obligations of academic life. They all seemed to conspire to pull you away from your writing. But I've watched you pour that creativity into other things. The gardens you've designed, the stories you tell our grandchildren, the way you've made River Maple Estate into a living novel of its own. I hope someday you'll find your way back to these pages. The world needs your voice, my love. It always has. Forever yours, Augustine. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear splashed onto the letter. Astrid, in an uncharacteristic gesture, reached across the table and took my hand. He believed in you, she said quietly, even back then. Yes, I managed, he did. Though I'd forgotten that part of myself for so long. I'm sorry, Mother. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry we made you forget too. We were so busy trying to protect you, to manage your life, that we never stopped to see who you really were. The afternoon light filtered through the library, windows, casting long shadows across Augustine's letter. Somewhere in the house, my phone was probably buzzing with messages from my agent, my publisher, the television producers. But for this moment, time seemed to stand still. Would you like to hear about my next book? I asked Astrid. I think you might particularly appreciate this one. It involves a complex legal conspiracy. Her smile was tentative but genuine. I'd like that very much. As I outlined Detective Blackwood's latest case, I saw Astrid's lawyer's mind engaging with the plot twists, offering insights about legal procedures and courtroom dynamics. For the first time in years, we were having a real conversation, professional to professional. The next few weeks brought more changes. Callum, inspired by our family's literary connection, proposed developing a writing retreat center on the unused portion of River Maple's grounds. Not for profit, he insisted, but for purpose. A place where other late-blooming writers could find their voice. The idea had merit, though not quite in the way Callum imagined. After discussions with my publisher and several writers' organizations, we developed plans for the River Maple Writers' Fellowship, a program specifically designed for women over 50 who were ready to tell their stories. Even Theron's wife, Zara, surprised me. She arrived one afternoon with an elaborate presentation about literary tourism and heritage preservation. River Maple Estate isn't just your home anymore, she explained, spreading out her carefully prepared materials. It's becoming a cultural landmark. We should embrace that, but on your terms. Her proposals, though initially focused on profit potential, actually contained some thoughtful ideas about maintaining the estate's integrity while sharing its literary significance with interested visitors. The television production added another layer of complexity to our evolving family dynamic. When the producers requested to use River Maple Estate for some exterior shots, my children's reactions revealed how far we'd come. "They'll need proper location agreements," Astrid said, already reviewing contracts. "The lighting at sunset is perfect for establishing shots," Delphine added, her influencer's eye assessing the visual possibilities. "We should document the whole process," Callum suggested. The transformation of River Maple from family estate to literary landmark. It's a story in itself. They were right, in their various ways. River Maple was transforming, just as I had transformed. The quiet widow's mansion was now a bustling creative hub, with meetings, interviews, and photography sessions becoming regular occurrences. But I made sure to maintain my private spaces. The hidden alcove in the library remained my personal writing, retreat, and the gardens continued to be my thinking grounds. Detective Blackwood's latest case was taking shape there, among the autumn roses and turning leaves. One evening, as I was working late in my study, I received an unexpected call from Margaret, my oldest granddaughter. "Grandma," she said without preamble, "I'm writing a story." At 17, Margaret had always been the quiet one, observing family dynamics with keen eyes that reminded me of myself at her age. "What kind of story, dear?" "It's about a girl who discovers her grandmother isn't who everyone thinks she is." She paused. "It's not very good yet, but would you like to come over tomorrow? We could talk about it in my writing alcove." Her excitement was palpable. "Really? Mom said you're probably too busy with all the book stuff." "I'm never too busy for a fellow writer," I told her, thinking of Augustine's letter and all the years I'd let my own writing wait. The next day, Margaret arrived with a notebook full of ideas and questions. We spent the afternoon in my alcove, discussing character development, plot structure, and the importance of finding your own voice. "How did you know you were ready?" she asked as we shared tea and cookies. "To show your writing to the world. I considered the question carefully. I don't think anyone ever feels completely ready, but there comes a moment when keeping your stories hidden becomes more painful than the fear of sharing them." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Like that Sunday dinner when Dad called you useless." "You know about that?" Mom told me. "She said it was the moment everything changed, not just you becoming M.W. Stormwind, but how we all saw you." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, remembering how my own children had viewed me before all this began. The following week brought another family development. Astrid called a meeting, not to discuss estate management or legal concerns, but to share news of her own. "I've enrolled in a creative writing course," she announced to our collective surprise. "Not to become a novelist," she added quickly, "but to better understand the creative process. I think it will help me represent artists and writers more effectively." We gathered in the library, all three of my children, their spouses, and even some of the grandchildren. The room that had once hosted tense family discussions was now filled with a different energy. "I've been thinking," Callum said uncharacteristically, hesitant, "about all those Sunday dinners we had here. How we talked about everything except what really mattered. Like how Mom was secretly building a literary career right under our noses," Theron added, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Or how we were so busy trying to modernize River Maple that we couldn't see it was already evolving," Zara contributed. Delphine, looking up from her phone, added, "The social media response to your story is incredible. Women everywhere are saying how you've inspired them to pursue their delayed dreams. I looked around at their faces, seeing them not as my children who needed guidance, but as adults capable of growth and change. Perhaps," I suggested, "it's time to restart our Sunday dinner tradition, but with a new approach." "What did you have in mind?" Astrid asked. "A literary salon of sorts. Good food, good conversation, and a chance to share our stories. All of them. Not just the ones we think others want to hear." The idea took hold immediately. Delphine started planning the social media strategy, while Zara suggested incorporating elements of traditional literary salons. Callum saw opportunities for networking, and Astrid began thinking about the legal implications of sharing creative work in a family setting. But it was Theron who surprised me most. "I've been reading your earlier work," he said quietly as the others discussed plans. "The stories Dad kept. They're different from your novels, but the voice is the same. Observant, compassionate, unafraid to look deeper. Your father always said I had a way of seeing beyond the surface," I replied, thinking of Augustine's letter. He was right. Theron hesitated. "I've started journaling myself. Nothing creative, just thoughts about all this. About how we sometimes fail to see the people closest to us." The first of our new Sunday gatherings was scheduled for the following week. As I prepared River Maple Estate for this latest transformation, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that fateful dinner months ago. My fourth Detective Blackwood novel was nearing completion, its themes of family, perception, and redemption influenced by recent events. The television adaptation was in pre-production, with a respected actress cast as Isabella Blackwood. The River Maple Writers' Fellowship had received hundreds of applications from women eager to follow their delayed dreams. But perhaps the most significant change was in the family dynamics themselves. We were learning to see each other as we really were, not as we had assumed each other to be. My children were discovering that their mother's useless, traditional ways had concealed a sharp mind and creative spirit. I was learning that their initial reactions to my revelation had come from a place of confusion and hurt, rather than pure dismissal. As I stood in my garden that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of possibility, I thought about Detective Blackwood's favorite saying, "The most challenging mysteries are the ones we create ourselves by refusing to see what's right in front of us." My family had finally begun to solve that mystery, and in doing so, we were all becoming better versions of ourselves. The revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday morning, delivered by a FedEx envelope that arrived between my agent's daily update and a call from the television producers. Inside was a single photograph, yellowed with age, showing a much younger version of myself standing behind a podium, accepting what appeared to be a literary award. The problem was I had no memory of this event ever happening. Attached was a note written in familiar handwriting, Augustine's. "My dearest Winnie, if you're reading this, then the time has finally come. There's something you need to know about your past, something I've protected you from for decades. The accident that you think happened in 1985 didn't just take your memories of that summer. It took your first success as a writer. You weren't always M.W. Stormwind. Once you were the celebrated author Marina Winters. I'm sorry for keeping this from you, but the doctors said remembering too soon might trigger another breakdown. I've arranged for everything to be revealed now, when you're strong enough to handle the truth. Forever yours, Augustine." My hands trembled as I read the note again. Marina Winters. The name stirred something deep in my memory, like a dream, half remembered upon waking. I vaguely recalled reading about her in literary magazines years ago, a promising mystery writer who disappeared from the publishing world after one acclaimed novel. I called June immediately. I need you to research something for me. Already on it, she replied, and I could hear her fingers flying over keyboard keys. Marina Winters, debut novel, The Midnight Garden, published in 1984. Won the New American Mystery Writer Award. Disappeared from public life after a car accident in 1985. Mary, this was you. The room seemed to spin slightly. How did you know what I was going to ask? Because I just received a package, too. Augustine left it with my mother before he died, with instructions to deliver it when certain conditions were met. It's full of newspaper clippings, reviews, and photographs. Mary, you were famous. I sank into my chair, staring at the photograph. The young woman at the podium had my face, but her eyes held a confidence I'd only recently rediscovered. Why can't I remember? The accident, June said softly. According to these papers, you were driving home from a literary festival when your car went off the road. The physical injuries healed, but the trauma caused selective memory loss. I finished. Augustine told me it was a minor accident, that I'd been coming home from visiting friends. He was protecting you. The doctor's report suggests that your mind blocked out everything associated with your writing career. It was too traumatic. Augustine. He made a choice. My next call was to Rafferty, who answered on the first ring. I just got the package, too, he said before I could speak. Augustine contacted me years ago, made me promise to keep an eye out for any signs that you were writing again. When your first manuscript arrived on my desk, you knew who I was. I knew who you had been, he corrected gently. But M.W. Stormwind isn't Marina Winters. You've created something entirely new, something even more powerful. The revelations kept coming throughout the day. More packages arrived, each containing pieces of a past I'd forgotten. Reviews of The Midnight Garden praised its innovative structure and complex female protagonist, elements that I'd unconsciously echoed in my Detective Blackwood series. My children arrived en masse by early afternoon, each clutching their own delivered revelations. Astrid brought legal documents, Callum had marketing materials from the 1980s, and Theron carried a bound collection of Marina Winters' short stories. Did Dad tell you? Theron asked as they gathered in the library. Before he died, did he ever hint at this? I shook my head, still trying to process everything. He protected me from it. Protected all of us. But why? Astrid demanded, her lawyer's mind struggling with the implications. Why keep this hidden for so long? Because of this, June said, arriving with another stack of documents. After the accident, there were complications. Depression, anxiety, panic attacks whenever anyone mentioned writing or publishing. The doctors advised Augustine to let you heal naturally, to let any memories return on their own. But they never did. I murmured, touching the photograph of my younger self. Until now, Callum added, his entrepreneur's mind clearly racing. Until you became M.W. Stormwind. Zara, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. The garden. In your first book as Marina Winters. It was about a garden, wasn't it? And now, all these years later. I've been writing about gardens again, I finished, thinking of the countless scenes in my Detective Blackwood novels that featured Important clues hidden in carefully tended gardens. The television producers called again, but Delphine intercepted the call. For once, she wasn't thinking about social media opportunities. "This changes everything," she said, looking around at our shell-shocked family. "The publicity, the adaptation, the whole narrative." She was right, of course. The story of a widow finding her voice in her 60s was compelling, but the revelation that I had been a celebrated author before, that trauma had buried those memories, and that I'd unconsciously found my way back to writing, that was something else entirely. "There's more," June said quietly, pulling out another document. "Marina Winters didn't just disappear after the accident. She had another manuscript, almost completed. It was never published, but Augustine kept it." My heart seemed to stop. "Where is it?" "That's the thing," June replied, scanning the papers. "According to these notes, you hid it somewhere in River Maple Estate before the accident. Augustine never found it." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Somewhere in this house, hidden for nearly 40 years, was a manuscript written by a version of myself I couldn't remember being. "We have to find it," Theron said, his voice urgent. "Mother, think. Even if you don't remember writing it, there might be clues." "The garden," Zara suggested. "Everything seems to come back to the garden." But I was already shaking my head. "No, not the garden. The library." I stood, moving toward the hidden alcove where I now did my writing. I chose this spot for a reason, didn't I? Some part of me remembered. The alcove had been my private sanctuary since we moved into River Maple Estate. Augustine had never questioned my insistence on keeping this space private, even when the children were young. Now I understood why. With trembling fingers I ran, my hands along the wood paneling until I felt it. A slight irregularity in the grain. Pressing gently, I heard a click, and a small compartment opened in the wall. Inside was a manuscript box, dusty but intact. The label read, "The Last Chapter by Marina Winters." "Open it," Astrid whispered, and I realized my children had gathered around me, all of us holding our breath. The manuscript was typed. This was 1985, after all. But the paper had preserved well in its sealed box. The dedication page read, "For Augustine, who taught me that love means letting someone find their own way back to themselves." As I began to read, memories stirred. Not all at once, but in fragments. Late nights at this very desk, the click of typewriter keys, Augustine bringing me coffee and quiet encouragement, the excitement of crafting the perfect scene. "It's a story about memory," I said slowly, the plot coming back to me as I turned the pages. About a woman who loses herself and has to solve the mystery of her own past. "Just like you're doing now," Callum observed. The manuscript was complete, the story full of twists and revelations that felt both familiar and new. My writing style had changed over the decades. Marina Winters had been bolder, more experimental, while M.W. Stormwind's voice was more measured, more intricate. "What are you going to do?" Theron asked as I closed the manuscript. It was a complex question. The revelation of Marina Winters' identity would certainly impact M.W. Stormwind's career. The publicity would be intense, the public fascinated by this literary resurrection story. "I'm going to read it," I said finally. "All of it. And then I'm going to decide if Marina Winters' last chapter should become M.W. Stormwind's next beginning." The days that followed were a blur of memories returning, some clear, others fragmented. I remembered the excitement of my first book, launch, the pride in Augustine's eyes as I accepted the award in the photograph. Other memories were darker. The accident, the fear, the way words became threatening instead of liberating. My children handled the revelation in characteristic ways. Astrid researched the legal implications of reclaiming my earlier identity. Callum explored the marketing potential of this literary Phoenix story. Theron, surprisingly, focused on reading everything Marina Winters had ever published, finding connections to M.W. Stormwind's work. The media, when they learned of the discovery, went into a frenzy. Literary legend returns. The mystery of Marina Winters solved. M.W. Stormwind's secret past revealed. Delphine handled the press with unexpected grace, controlling the narrative while protecting our family's privacy. But the most profound impact was personal. As I read the last chapter, I felt myself having conversations across time. Marina Winters speaking to M.W. Stormwind, my younger self reaching out to my present self. The story she had written was haunting, beautiful, and uncannily prescient. "You have to publish it," June said after reading the manuscript. "It's not just another book. It's the missing piece of your story." She was right, but something held me back. The manuscript was excellent, but it was written by a different version of myself. Publishing it would mean fully embracing both identities, the young writer who disappeared and the older writer who emerged from that loss. The decision came to me one evening as I worked in my garden. I was deadheading roses, just as I had been doing the day Theron called me useless, when I realized something. Marina Winters hadn't disappeared. She had gone dormant, like a perennial waiting for the right season to bloom again. I called an emergency family meeting, gathering everyone in the library where so much had changed over the past months. "I've made a decision," I announced, looking at their expectant faces. "I'm going to publish the last chapter, but not as Marina Winters or M.W. Stormwind. I'm going to publish it under my real name, Winifred Whitmore." The room erupted in discussion, but I held up my hand. "There's more. I want to combine the publication with a memoir. The story of Marina Winters, the accident, the years of forgotten memories, and the emergence of M.W. Stormwind. It's time to tell the whole story." "Are you sure?" Astrid asked, concern evident in her voice. "The publicity will be intense." "I'm sure," I replied, thinking of all the women who had written to me about their own delayed dreams. Sometimes the most important mysteries we solve are our own. The revelation of my past identity changed everything, yet in some ways, nothing changed at all. I was still a writer, still a mother, still the keeper of River Maple Estate. But now, I was also something more. A woman who had lost herself and found her way back through words, twice over. As I sit here now preparing for the dual publication of the last chapter and my memoir, I think about that Sunday dinner that seemed to end everything but actually began something new. I think about Theron calling me useless, not knowing that his words would unlock a door to my past. I think about Augustine, protecting me all those years while leaving breadcrumbs for me to follow when I was ready. Most of all, I think about the power of stories, not just the ones we write, but the ones we live, lose, and rediscover. Marina Winters wrote mysteries about gardens and memory. M.W. Stormwind writes about a detective who sees what others miss. And Winifred Whitmore. She writes about truth in all its complex, beautiful, unexpected forms. The garden is blooming, again, and so am I. The weeks leading up to the dual publication of the last chapter and my memoir, Finding My Words, the Marina Winters story, transformed River Maple Estate into a whirlwind of activity. My publisher had planned an ambitious, Launch strategy, combining literary prestige with the human interest angle of my recovered identity. The television adaptation of my Detective Blackwood series was being rewritten to incorporate subtle references to my past, and a documentary crew had begun filming the process of bringing Marina Winter's final work to light. But beneath the professional chaos, a more personal storm was brewing. The return of my memories had unleashed a flood of emotions and revelations that threatened to overwhelm not just me, but my entire family. It started with a phone call from my oldest friend, Catherine Blackwood. Yes, the inspiration for Detective, Isabella Blackwood. She had seen the news about Marina Winter's identity and called from her retirement home in Vermont. "I knew," she said without preamble. "Augustine made me promise not to tell you, but I was there that night, Winnie. The night of the accident." My hands gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean you were there?" "I was following you home from the literary festival. You were upset about something. You'd received a letter that afternoon that shook you badly. You were driving too fast, distracted. I tried to catch up, to get you to pull over, but then..." Her voice trailed off, and suddenly another memory surfaced. Headlights in my rearview mirror, a familiar car trying to get my attention, a letter crumpled in my lap, tears blurring my vision. "What was in the letter, Catherine?" A long pause. "I don't know. You wouldn't show it to me. But after the accident, while you were in the hospital, Augustine found it in the car. Whatever it said, it was enough to make him decide that protecting you from your writing life was the only way to help you heal." The revelation sent me to the library, to the boxes of documents Augustine had left about my past. Hours of searching finally revealed a sealed envelope with my name on it, marked, "Only when she's ready, A." Inside was another envelope, worn and water-stained, postmarked June 15th, 1985, the day before my accident. The letter inside was brief but devastating. "Dear Mrs. Winters, your recent success has brought certain facts to my attention. Your debut novel, The Midnight Garden, bears striking similarities to an unpublished manuscript my late mother wrote in 1962. I have proof that you had access to this manuscript during your time as a student at Riverside University. Unless you publicly acknowledge this source and arrange appropriate compensation, I will be forced to take legal action. Sincerely, Edmund Blackwood." My hands shook as I read the name. Blackwood, Catherine's cousin, a bitter man who had always resented his mother's unpublished literary aspirations. The accusation was false. I had never seen his mother's manuscript. But the threat of scandal, the potential damage to my reputation, the fear of public humiliation. "Mother?" Astrid's voice startled me. She stood in the library doorway, legal papers in hand. "Are you all right?" I held out the letter wordlessly. She read it, her lawyer's mind immediately grasping the implications. "This is why you stopped writing," she said quietly. "Not just the accident, but this threat." I must have been driving to Catherine's house, I realized, to confront Edmund, to clear my name. But I never made it. Astrid was already pulling out her phone. "Edmund Blackwood died in 1997, but his estate... Let me make some calls." Within hours, she had traced the history of both Edmund's claim and his mother's supposed manuscript. "It never existed," she reported. "I found his mother's papers in the university archives. She wrote poetry, not novels, and nothing remotely similar to The Midnight Garden." Edmund was lying. The truth should have been liberating, but instead it opened new wounds. How many years had I lost because of one man's malicious lie? How Had this buried trauma influenced my writing as M.W. Stormwind, my creation of Detective Isabella Blackwood, even my relationship with my children? The documentary crew, sensing the dramatic potential, wanted to include this revelation in their film. I refused. Some parts of the story needed to be told in my own way, in my own time. Meanwhile, preparations for the book launch continued. My publisher had planned a series of events at major bookstores, culminating in a grand celebration at River Maple Estate. The guest list included literary critics, television producers, and most importantly, readers who had been touched by both Marina Winters and M.W. Stormwind's work. Theron, showing unexpected sensitivity, suggested incorporating elements from both my literary identities into the launch. The garden where Marina Winters set her first mystery, combined with Detective Blackwood's keen eye for detail, he explained, a way to bridge past and present. Zara and Delphine threw themselves into the planning, their combined expertise in social events and media strategy creating something both elegant and meaningful. The garden would be lit with thousands of tiny lights, creating an ethereal atmosphere that matched the mysterious elements of my work. But as the launch date approached, complications arose. A journalist doing research for a feature story discovered something in the archives of my old publisher. Notes about a collaboration between Marina Winters and another writer, someone who might have a claim to some of the ideas in the last chapter. Astrid handled the legal aspects, tracing the paper trail and establishing that the collaboration had never moved beyond preliminary discussions. But the incident sparked more memories, meetings with other writers, shared ideas over coffee. The vibrant literary community I had been part of before the accident. We need to contact them, Callum suggested. The writers you knew back then. They're part of this story too. He was right. Through June's research and Astrid's connections, we began locating the people who had known Marina Winters. Some had continued writing. Others had moved on to different careers, but all remembered the promising young author who had disappeared so suddenly. Their stories added new layers to my recovered memories. Elizabeth Chen, now a successful mystery writer herself, remembered our late-night discussions about plot structure. Marcus Sullivan, who had given up writing to become a literature professor, still had notes from our workshop group. And Patricia Reynolds, my first editor, had kept every draft of The Midnight Garden, including my original handwritten outline. As these pieces of my past emerged, I found myself struggling to reconcile Marina Winters' voice with M.W. Stormwind's. Reading through my early work, I could see the seeds of what would later become Detective Blackwood. The attention to detail, the focus on women's experiences, the use of gardens as both setting and metaphor. One evening, as I worked in my study, Theron appeared with a surprising proposal. We should include them all, he said, in the documentary, in the launch, in everything. Not just the successful writers, but everyone who was part of your journey, before and after. Show how stories connect people across time. His suggestion led to a series of interviews conducted in my library with the people who had shaped both my literary identities. Elizabeth Chen spoke about how Marina Winters had influenced her own writing. Marcus Sullivan shared anecdotes about our workshop discussions. Patricia Reynolds brought out her editorial notes, showing how my style had evolved. But the most powerful interview was with Catherine Blackwood. At 87, she made the journey from Vermont to River Maple Estate, her presence both a reminder of my past and a bridge to my present. "I knew you'd find your way back to writing," she said as we sat in the garden. "You couldn't stay away from stories any more than these roses could stop blooming. Edmund's lie might have buried Marina Winters, but it couldn't kill the writer in you." Her words sparked something in my memory, a scene I had written in the last chapter, but had forgotten until now. The protagonist, investigating a decades-old mystery, discovers that the truth had been hidden in plain sight, wrapped in layers of protective lies told with loving intentions. Augustine protected me, I said slowly. But he also left breadcrumbs, the library alcove, the hidden manuscript, the letters he arranged to be delivered when I was ready. He knew I would need to solve this mystery myself. The revelation gave me a new perspective on the upcoming launch. It wasn't just about publishing 2 books or revealing my dual identity. It was about acknowledging all the versions of myself. The young writer silenced by fear, the mother who channeled her creativity into her family and home, the widow who found her voice again. As the launch date drew closer, River Maple Estate hummed with preparation. The gardens were being manicured to match descriptions from both The Midnight Garden and my Detective Blackwood series. The library was reorganized to showcase both collections of work. Even the menu for the launch party was themed around significant meals from my books. But the real transformation was happening within my family. Astrid, inspired by the legal aspects of my story, began working on a series of articles about intellectual property rights in literature. Callum, looking beyond the immediate marketing opportunities, started a foundation to support older writers, returning to their craft. Theron, most surprisingly, began keeping a journal of his own, processing his role in my journey back to myself. 1 week before the launch, another discovery shook our world. June, still researching my past, found a series of letters between Augustine and my old publisher, dated just before his death. "He was planning to tell you everything," she said, showing me the correspondence. "He had decided it was time, that you were strong enough. But then he died, taking the truth with him. Or so he thought. Instead, he had left a trail of clues that led me back to myself, trusting that when the time was right, I would be ready to follow it." The night before the launch, I gathered my family in the library. The room was filled with advance copies of both books, promotional materials, and the accumulated evidence of my dual literary life. "Tomorrow," I told them, "everything changes. Again. The world will know about Marina Winters and M.W. Stormwind. They'll know about the accident, the lost memories, Edmund's lie, and Augustine's protection. But what they won't fully understand is how this has changed us, all of us. We're not the same family that sat down to that Sunday dinner," Astrid acknowledged. "When I called you useless," Theron added, his voice thick with emotion, "I couldn't see past my own assumptions. I never imagined—" "None of us did," Callum interrupted. "We were so busy trying to manage your future that we couldn't see your past or your present." Zara, who had been arranging flowers for the launch, roses, of course, looked up. "But that's part of the story too, isn't it? How blindness can come from love, how protection can become limitation, how sometimes we have to lose something to find it again." She was right. Every part of this journey, from Marina Winters' early success to the accident, from the years of forgotten memories to my emergence as M.W. Stormwind, from that painful Sunday dinner to the discovery of my true identity, had led us here. Tomorrow the world would read the last chapter, finally completing Marina Winters' story. They would read my memoir, understanding how M.W. Stormwind rose from Marina's ashes. They would see the documentary, watching our family grapple with truth and reconciliation. But tonight, in the quiet of River Maple Estate's library, surrounded by the books that had shaped both my lives, I felt a deep sense of completion. The mystery of my past had been solved, but the story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. I opened the last chapter to its final pages, where Marina Winters had written words I had forgotten, but somehow always known. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are the ones we carry within ourselves, waiting for the right moment to be solved. Tomorrow would bring that solution to light. The morning of the book launch dawned with an ethereal mist hovering over River Maple Estates gardens. As I stood at my bedroom window watching the sun slowly burn through the fog, I could see both versions of myself reflected in the glass. Marina Winters, the young writer silenced by trauma, and M.W. Stormwind, the seasoned author who had emerged from that silence. The grand revelation was scheduled for sunset, a symbolic timing that hadn't been lost on anyone. Journalists had been arriving since dawn, setting up their equipment on the lawn. The documentary crew was capturing every moment, their cameras tracking the transformation of River Maple Estate from private sanctuary to literary landmark. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that bridged both my identities. A classics blazer in Marina's favorite shade of midnight blue, accessorized with the silver pen necklace I wore for M.W. Stormwind's first book signing. As I fastened the clasp, my hands trembled slightly. "Ready?" June appeared in the doorway, holding a package. "This just arrived from Catherine. She said to open it before the ceremony." Inside was a leather-bound notebook, Catherine's diary, from 1985. A note fell from its pages. "The truth, as I witnessed it. Your friend always, C.B." But before I could read more, Astrid rushed in. "Mother, Edmund Blackwood's daughter is here. She's demanding to speak with you." My heart stuttered. "I thought you said the family had no claims." "They don't," Astrid assured me. "But she says it's not about legal matters. She has something you need to see." Margaret Blackwood was waiting in the library, a striking woman in her 50s who bore little resemblance to her bitter father. In her hands was a worn manila envelope. "I found this in my father's effects," she said without preamble. "It's his confession. He wrote it before he died, admitting that he lied about my grandmother's manuscript. He was jealous of your success, of how you had achieved what his mother never could. I'm here to make it right." The confession, dated 1997, detailed how Edmund had fabricated the entire claim, driven by a toxic mixture of grief over his mother's unfulfilled dreams and resentment toward successful women writers. He had chosen me as his target precisely because of my rising prominence in the literary world. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said softly. "He stole decades of your life with that lie." "No," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "He changed my path, but he didn't steal my life. Everything I experienced, everyone I became, it all led to this moment." The launch event began at sunset, just as planned. Hundreds of guests filled the gardens, their excited murmurs mixing with the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. My children had outdone themselves with the arrangements. The setting was magical, with thousands of tiny lights twinkling in the trees, and roses from both Marina's and Isabella's gardens perfuming the air. I stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd. Literary critics who had praised both Marina Winters and M.W. Stormwind sat alongside readers who had written to me about their own delayed dreams. The documentary crew filmed from discreet positions, capturing this moment of convergence. 38 years ago, I began, a young writer named Marina Winters disappeared on a dark road, running from a lie that threatened to destroy her. Today she returns, not as a ghost from the past, but as part of a larger truth. I told them everything, the accident, the lost memories, Augustine's protective love, the years of unknowing creativity, and finally, the journey back to myself. I watched understanding dawn on faces as they connected Marina's stylistic flourishes with Detective Blackwood's methodical observations. "But this isn't just my story," I continued. "It's a story about how we sometimes have to lose ourselves to find ourselves, about how creativity can't be truly silenced, only transformed, about how it's never too late to reclaim your voice." As I spoke these words, I saw tears in Theron's eyes, pride in Astrid's face, and wonder in Callum's expression. They were finally seeing me, all of me, and in doing so, seeing themselves more clearly too. The evening culminated with a dramatic unveiling of both books. The last chapter, Marina Winter's final work, restored to life after decades in darkness, and beside it, Finding My Words, the story of how one writer's voice refused to be silenced. As I signed copies later that night, I met readers who had followed both my journeys without knowing they were one and the same. Women who had started writing in their 60s, inspired by M.W. Stormwind's emergence. Young authors who had studied Marina Winter's innovative narrative techniques in college. The last person in line was Margaret Blackwood. She handed me her father's confession. "This belongs to you now. Do with it what you will." I looked at the envelope, then at the garden where both Marina's and Isabella's stories had bloomed. With deliberate movements, I tore the confession into pieces and let them fall into a nearby rose bush. "Some mysteries," I said, "are better left solved but not dwelled upon." Later that night, after the crowds had gone and the lights had been dimmed, I sat in my writing alcove with my family. We were all different now, changed by truth, by understanding, by the power of stories finally told. To Marina Winters, Theron proposed a toast, and to M.W. Stormwind. "No," I corrected gently, "to all of us, and to the stories we have yet to tell." The mystery was solved, the truth revealed, but this wasn't an ending. It was, as all good stories are, just another beginning. 1 year after the revelation that shook the literary world, River Maple Estate has found a new rhythm. The gardens still bloom with both Marina's mysterious roses and Isabella's investigative flowers, but now they welcome writing groups, book clubs, and aspiring authors seeking their own voice. The library, once my private sanctuary, hosts weekly workshops for women over 50 who are ready to tell their stories. The success of both the last chapter and my memoir exceeded everyone's expectations. Marina Winter's final novel, published after 38 years of silence, became a literary sensation, studied in universities and praised for its innovative structure and prescient themes. Finding My Words touched a deeper chord, inspiring countless readers to reclaim their own forgotten dreams. The Detective Blackwood television series premiered last month, with a subtle nod to my dual identity woven into the protagonist's backstory. The critics noticed, of course, how Isabella's investigation of cold cases paralleled my own journey of rediscovery. The show's success has brought new readers to both Marina's and M.W. Stormwind's books, creating a unique literary legacy that spans decades. But the most profound changes have happened within our family. Our Sunday gatherings have evolved into something we call the Story Circle, where we share not just meals, but the narratives of our lives. My children, once so focused on managing my future, have found their own creative voices. Astrid surprised us all by starting a legal blog about intellectual property rights in literature, inspired by Edmund Blackwood's false claims and their impact on my life. Her writing, precise and passionate, has helped other authors protect their work while maintaining their creative freedom. I understand now," she told me recently. "How words can be both weapons and shields. Dad protected you with silence, but he also left you the tools to break that silence when you were ready." Callum's entrepreneurial spirit found a new direction in the River Maple Writers Fellowship, which has already helped dozens of older writers publish their first books. The program, housed in the renovated carriage house, provides mentorship, workshops, and a supportive community for those beginning their creative journey later in life. "Every time a new writer finds their voice," he said during our last fellowship graduation, "I think about how close we came to silencing yours forever." Theron's transformation has been perhaps the most remarkable. The son who once called me useless now runs a successful literary podcast, interviewing authors about their creative journeys and the obstacles they've overcome. His first guest? His mother, in both her incarnations. "I've learned to listen," he explained when I asked about his new career path. "Really listen, not just to what people are saying, but to what their silence might be hiding." Zara and Delphine have found their own niches in our expanded literary world. Zara's event planning skills have made River Maple Estate a sought-after venue for book launches and literary festivals, while Delphine's social media expertise has created a thriving online community of late-blooming writers. The documentary about my story, The Writer Returns, won several awards and sparked important discussions about trauma, creativity, and the power of second chances. But more importantly, it captured the moment our family began to heal, to see each other not as roles to be played, but as stories to be shared. June, my steadfast friend through both my literary lives, has written her own book about our journey. The Keeper of Stories chronicles her role in preserving both Marina Winter's legacy and M.W. Stormwind's emergence. Her perspective adds another layer to our intertwined narratives. Catherine Blackwood, now in her late 80s, visits often. She loves sitting in the garden, watching new writers find inspiration among the roses she once helped plant. Her presence reminds me that some friendships, like some stories, can survive any silence. Margaret Blackwood and I have developed an unexpected friendship. She's become a regular contributor to our writing workshops, sharing her own journey of understanding and forgiveness. Together, we've created a scholarship fund for writers affected by trauma, turning her father's destructive lie into a force for healing. The publishing world has embraced both my identities, with special editions that pair Marina's early work with M.W. Stormwind's mysteries. Scholars have written papers about the evolution of my style, tracing themes and motifs that survived even when my memories didn't. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome has been the letters I receive from readers who see their own potential for renewal in my story. Women who had set aside their creativity for family obligations. Men who had buried their artistic dreams under professional success. Young people afraid to share their truth. All finding courage in the tale of a writer who lost herself and found her way back through words. My latest project is a collaboration with my granddaughter Margaret, who has inherited both Marina's love of gardens and Detective Blackwood's eye for detail. Together, we're writing a series of stories about a young girl who discovers her grandmother's forgotten manuscripts in an old garden shed. Art imitating life, with a twist of intergenerational healing. River Maple Estate itself has become a character in this ongoing story. The rooms that once echoed with family tensions now buzz with creative energy. The gardens that witnessed my silence now nurture new voices. Even the hidden alcove where Marina's last manuscript waited has become a sacred space for writers seeking their own breakthrough moments. Last week, during our story circle, Theron asked me if I regret the years of silence, the decades spent not knowing who I had been. No, I answered truthfully. Those years shaped M.W. Stormwind just as surely as Marina Winter's early success shaped her work. We are all the product of our silences as much as our words. Augustine would understand this, I think. His love took the form of protection when I needed it, and breadcrumbs when I was ready to find my way back. The letters he left, arranged to be delivered at just the right moment, showed how well he knew me. Both versions of me. The advance copies of my new book arrived yesterday. The Garden of Second Chances is the first novel published under my full name, Winifred Whitmore. It's neither a Marina Winters mystery nor a Detective Blackwood investigation, but something new, a story about how creativity, like certain flowers, can lie dormant through long winters, waiting for the right season to bloom again. My children gathered in the library as I opened the box of books. The dedication page reads, "For my family, who learn to see me as I am, and for all those who believe it's never too late to become who you were meant to be." "Mother," Astrid said, holding her copy, "you've created something extraordinary here." "No," I corrected her gently. "We all did. Every story needs both writers and readers, both silence and voice, both ending and beginning." Tomorrow, another writing workshop will begin at River Maple Estate. Another group of hopeful writers will gather in the garden, among the roses that have witnessed so much change. They'll share their stories, find their voices, and perhaps discover, as I did, that it's never too late to write your own next chapter. As I sit in my study now, watching the sunset paint the garden in shades of possibility, I think about all the versions of myself that have lived within these walls. Marina Winters, the promising young author silenced by trauma, the mother and wife who channeled her creativity into creating a home. M.W. Stormwind, emerging from that silence with new stories to tell. And now, finally, Winifred Whitmore, embracing all these identities as parts of a larger narrative. The mystery of who I was has been solved, but the story continues. After all, every ending is just another beginning, waiting to be written. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.